Welcome from the ANA to our panel discussion today, Where to Next with Experiential Marketing. We are lucky to have such an august panel of experts here to share their thoughts on where we are within experiential marketing, what's happened over this past year and where we are headed. And they're going to share their thoughts with you today. They're hosted by our committee co-chairs, and I'm going to introduce them to you. So our committee this year our co-chairs this year are Dee Hall, who's the Executive General Manager from Advantage Solutions. Dee, wave hello and say hi. And then Cliff Rigano, who's the Head of Culture, Lifestyle, and Event Marketing at Jägermeister. And then we've got a terrific group of panelists with us today. So we've got Michael Goldstein, who's the VP and Head of Sponsorships at MasterCard, Christina Hull, who's the Head of Experiential Marketing at Verizon, Jamey Sunshine, who's the Head of Experiential Marketing at Nestlé USA, and Ronnie Yoked, who's the Head of Experiential at Anheuser-Busch. Ronnie, I forgot to ask, did I say your name correctly?
Said it perfectly.
Perfectly. See, we're off to a good start. Okay, well, this is going to be a freestyle kind of a Q&A session. We ask those of you who are joining us today to keep cameras off and audio off so that we can just focus on our panelists. And then if you do have questions for the panel, please add them into the chat function and we'll get to them toward the end of our time today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to the capable hands of Dee and Cliff. And thanks for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm so excited to have this session today, and we've been thinking about it for a long time. As Gina had said, my name's Dee Hall. I am one of the executive general managers at Advantage Marketing Partners and one of the co-chairs for this experiential and sponsorship committee. Have been engaged with the ANA for something like 15 plus years and think it's really one of the most prestigious groups that we can be a part of as marketers. So thanks for joining us. I share this role, as Gina mentioned, with my friend and peer, Cliff Rigano, who is the Creative Director of Culture, Content, and Experiential Marketing at one of the coolest brands around. Cliff, do you want to say a few words before I get started?
Oh, just that it is an honor and a privilege to be here, and I am very excited to hear the sage words of our panelists today. It's been quite a ride, so I think that in some ways, when nothing made sense, other things made perfect sense, and I am excited to dive into what all of that looked like respectfully. So super excited to be here and to be hosting this with you, my friend.
Super, thank you, Cliff. As we kick off this prestigious panel discussion of experiential marketers, I just wanted to take a moment to reflect a few minutes on the past 12 months. I think that one of the things that stood out for me and for us during this COVID time of sheltering, lockdowns, halted weddings, missed get-togethers, canceled events, etc., is that the human spirit is incredibly resilient and that we crave personal connections. And I think we all have a new appreciation, right, for the simple notion of just a hug. We found ways over the last 12 months to stay connected as brands and humans. And we also found unique ways, I think, to create personal experiences that mattered to us most, right? This gives me great hope that IRL experiences are here to stay. And that we as a culture are going to be yearning for experiences now more than ever before, right? No crystal ball. I wish we did have a crystal ball for this wacky and wonderful discipline, but I think that we should all be feeling super optimistic about the now and the near of our industry. And I fully believe that we are on the precipice of great activations to come. And who better to hear from than this great panel to talk about those things. So thanks for joining us today. And now let's get this party started. So Cliff, I was going to have you introduce the panelists, but I think that Gina's already done a fabulous job with that. So we're going to start with our first question, and it's going to be a question that's going to go to each one of our panelist members. So we'll go one by one. Jamey, I'm going to start with you. But the question to all of you is the same. We know that it was an incredible year of 2020 COVID, and as we're into the beginning of 2021, it's still feeling like a pretty crazy year. Experiential marketing was on track to have its best year ever in 2020. And then everything, of course, hit a screeching halt. So just wanted to know, as we get started here, for those on the call today, how did it affect your work? How did it affect your team, your internal teams, and then also your business partners? Jamey, could you get us started with that one?
Yeah, absolutely. And first, Gina, Clifty, thank you for having us. Yeah, Dee, you said it came to a screeching halt, and you're absolutely right. We think back to like March of last year, we had a number of programs that were about to launch and some that were already active. And like everybody, right, we immediately paused those, and that had significant impact internally, but as you said, for our business partners and including our agencies. And we have at Nestlé a field marketing team that focuses on our ready-to-drink business. So Nesquik and Canadian Cold Brew, that team is out in cities across the country activating every day. So they were significantly impacted, and we had to just completely take a step back, pull the teams out from any activations. And over the course of the next few months after that, few weeks really, I should say, is that we completely redesigned our approach. The team did an amazing job, just showed incredible agility. And we had different work streams going. One group focused on new safety precautions, another group focused on new strategies, and essentially really figuring out the way forward. And we were able to fairly quickly develop that new plan, and the team was activating again in June. And we've been activating ever since. And the activations though, certainly don't look the same. We're back to physical engagement now, but getting back to last June and through the summer, we were much more digitally led and continue to be. And we've been using this phrase internally where we leverage prior to the pandemic, digital as an amplifier. And now we look at digital as an enabler. And this whole situation over the past year, as tough as it's been, it's led us to think very differently, kind of rethink the way that we think about experiential, the role it plays, and how we drive engagement. So as challenging as it's been over the past year, and it certainly has, I know for everybody here and on the call, it's actually led to some great solutions and a different way of working, and benefited us now, but also it will continue to as we go forward.
Thanks, Jamey. I in listening to you, I have to say, we've always known, us being experiential marketers, that we're a crafty crew, right? That we're flexible and we have an incredible amount of agility. I can't imagine a better way for that skill set to be featured than for what we all did coming through COVID. So applaud that. Thank you for that. Christina, do you have a few words you might want to share?
Thank you. So, I mean, again, it certainly did come to a screeching halt. And for us, we had thousands of local events and big tentpole moments, all just completely stopped. And it was just a really, if you think back to that time, an uncertain time, just personally. And so there was moments of course, caring for the work we do, but also for our people. And, I think there was just immense amounts of compassion going out to all of us on the team, and working remotely became, just so turnkey, and having a regular phone call now seems odd if you're not seeing somebody on your computer or on your phone. But for us, we immediately pivoted, right? We were like, all right, there's not going to be a place to do something live, but you could still bring live experiences to consumers. So how do we do that? And when we were thinking about that at that time, it was, how do we do that with a purpose? So we turned on a dime and stood up a program called Pay It Forward Live in support of small businesses, where every Tuesday and Thursday we had live music and gaming events. We did all of the production for these artists at the level of Dave Matthews, Alicia Keys, Chance the Rapper, all from their homes. So as all of you out there as experiential producers, you imagine how nerve-wracking that was every week to go live, but we did it, and it gave consumers and fans something to look forward to when there were no sports on TV. There was just a moment of like less content, and it also gave our business partners, and our agencies something to really work on that had a purposeful, motivation to it. So really proud of that work and the teams coming together, because we ran that for 9 weeks and raised a lot of awareness and partnership for small businesses. So
that's awesome. I'm also proud of the empathy that's come out of our industry for all those people that were personally and professionally impacted by COVID, and the vast amount of people that work in our industry and support and make things happen for us. So I love hearing that. Thanks for sharing that, Christina. Ronnie, I'd love you to chat a little bit. And I just want you to know that I loved what you did with Post Malone coming off of New Year's. And that may be, an example of some of the kinds of things that you all did during this time. But again, how did it affect your work, your team, and your business partners?
Yeah, I mean, I can reiterate everything that the wonderful experiential marketers have already mentioned, but I think, listen, not to take anything away from everyone, and I think, Cliff, you can relate, but like beer and experiences are like hand in hand, right? And so, it was devastating. I think lucky for us that, a ton of our business in the US is off-premise led. Also lucky for us, we had strong visionary leadership that knew like none of our plans make sense anymore. So like very quickly, it was like, the plans don't work for consumers and where they are. So change the plans. Don't hold on to them and try to push them through. And that was not just for experiential marketing. That was across the board. Everyone in our company very quickly, like I'm talking about like by March 13th, we were already like, okay, let's go. And we kind of split things up into what we called ideas for good and ideas for growth. And I'm talking very early on in the pandemic, right? So what are the things that are going to benefit people? So that's when we did, the Red Cross initiatives with Budweiser, because people were not donating blood, right? And now you're seeing that manifest in more vaccine awareness with Budweiser and driving things like that. But there was also just straight entertainment, right? So what can we do for people at home to just make their life better? And so that is where we utilized a lot of our existing platforms that we already had. We already play in all of the amazing passion points that people care about: wellness, music, sports. So we took a lot of our existing properties and just found a way to make them virtual. So that's kind of work-based. We kind of redid the plans. And by the way, we're still redoing our plans all the time because things are constantly evolving and changing. And what used to be a business focused on 1 year and 2 year and 3 year and 5 year planning, we are like 2-month planning. And I think it's necessary if you're consumer first to really, because as things change dramatically, and also like city by city and state by state, right? And finding and understanding what we need to do and what's relevant to show up for our consumers. I think team-wise, man, I tell my team, it's a silver lining. We have gotten stronger, more nimble, better. So like it's been rough and it's been hard, but we have been blessed to be able to keep our jobs, to be able to work, to be able to do what we love, and to be able to grow and be better, right? Like my team was already touching all elements of marketing, from digital to production to media, everything. But they weren't necessarily like the most proficient in every one of those things. Right. And they now had to be. And I think what's really important and what I saw in our company and needs to be said is like, it could have easily been our digital marketers or our comms lead doing these virtual experiences, but they did it. And there's a reason why. It's because experiential marketers were the ones most equipped to create experiences, content experiences. And so I like to say we moved from experiential marketing to experience marketing. It doesn't matter if it's at home or out of the home, like we are responsible for creating experiences. And so that's been really, really exciting. And we're continuing to do that, right? Whether it be in home or out of the home. And then for our partners, I mean, listen, it's been rough. all of our agencies furloughed a ton of people. All of our, partners, we've seen a lot of them have to kind of shutter their doors. We have a great partnership with Live Nation, all of our music festival partners. I feel really proud of the fact that I've heard from countless people like, listen, we created experiences for people at home. And of course, at the end of the day, to bring relevancy for our products, but we also employed a ton of people every time we put on a live stream. And I've had, talent say, man, I get to hire my crew back who's been out of work, or I get to bring people back on board. So I don't take that lightly. And I don't think it's spoken enough about, even internally, when we look at like ROI or KPIs, like, man, that in and of itself is really powerful. So I could keep going, but I'll stop.
Well, we're going to have you keep going. Trust me, Ronnie. One thing that you said, and you said this on an earlier conversation, and I jotted it down, and I love the comment about going from experiential marketing to experience marketing. And I want everyone to take note of that on this phone call, because I think that's really how we need to look at the business. I also hear you and having to be nimble, right? And, I think we as experiential marketers always had to come in with plan B, right? What's your backup plan, right? I think what it's changed into is the backup plan to the backup plan to the backup plan, and a focus on being nimble more than we ever have before. But I also love what I'm hearing from all of you is how we took to heart those people that were affected by the downturn in this business. And it makes my heart swell to hear everyone talk about it. So I think that's awesome. And thank you, Ronnie, for those comments. Michael, I would love to have this question now come to you. And I think that knowing that you oversee sponsorships as well as a primary focus of what you do for North America, talk to us a little bit about your feelings and how it affected your work, your team, and your business partners.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for having me. I mean, I think Jamey and Christina and Ronnie have covered a lot of similar ground that is relevant in MasterCard world. One of the benefits, and there perhaps weren't many, but one of the benefits of the environment we had to deal with is that everyone was affected, right? It wasn't an East Coast thing or a West Coast thing. It wasn't sports or music. It was sort of everything. I think they've touched on a lot of it: being nimble, being creative. How do you create what we call virtual priceless experiences, right? For our cardholders, for our customers. How do we leverage our ambassadors? I mean, we tend to be a brand that uses a lot of ambassadors because of who we are, right? We're not a beer brand or a chocolate brand or a phone, right? That people, right? No one wakes up going, oh, I cannot wait to use MasterCard today. Right. So we use ambassadors to bring our brand to life anyway. And I think that the COVID environment sort of showed us how important they were to us and allowed us to connect with both our customers and our cardholders. And when I say customers, for us, that's our issuing banks and merchants. And so, we tried to pivot and do things very quickly, but we also tried to be thoughtful about it. You've heard that from some of the other panelists. Right, it's great to have Ian Poulter give people a putting lesson at home, but not everyone has a putting green at home. So we needed to make sure he could talk about, you can do it in front of your mirror, even if you're stuck in an apartment, or you can do it in your driveway, even if you're right, you don't have the opportunity to have some of the setup that he has, or you can, be Tim Wakefield and go out into the backyard with your daughter and practice your knuckleball, right? You don't need a baseball field. You can just step out into your backyard because there's perhaps nowhere else to go. And then, we leveraged, we heard, Ryan talk about Live Nation, and certainly the live music business has been hit very hard. And, we worked with an artist like Camila Cabello to put together an acoustic set at home. And then we actually zoomed in some of her band members to give her some background support and sort of figured that out. So there were all these different ways and things we had to think about. And yeah, it was internal, it was external, it was customer, it was consumer. I think the pandemic impacted everything we do and did across the board. And, as I like to say to people, there's no baseline for this. There's no precedent, right? It's not, 10 years ago when this happened, we did this and it worked or it didn't work. It had been, a century, and experiential marketing was a little different back then. So we tried to just pivot and learn as we went, and are still learning as things continue to evolve.
Super. I tell you, I really feel, and I could be jaded, but I really feel it as though it's the experiential marketers that held up marketing in 2020. Just saying. And I think we can experience that by everything that's being said today. Cliff, did you want to jump in?
I was just going to say, I think you're absolutely right. If you don't understand what's at the heart of what a consumer wants to experience, when there are moments of change, you just won't know how to read the room, right? So it is critical to be able to really connect those dots. And I think that experiential marketing does a great job of that. You know, what I think is so exciting after the first question of hearing everyone that's spoken, and thank you all again, is I hear courage, and I hear leadership, and I hear vision. And in times of trouble and in times of upheaval, these are the things that push people forwards, right? And it's exciting because, you know, adversity not only builds character, it reveals character. So as you move into these new programs and experiences, you start to see success. So I'm going to start to point this next question based on some of the feedback that I heard, but it's applicable to everyone. So if any other panelists would like to jump in, please feel free. But Christina, you said something very interesting before when you were talking through your journey. And I think that, you know, Ronnie also continued it as well. But, you know, specifically for the Verizon piece, thousands of events have been canceled. Thousands of people furloughed, right? And now you start to launch new platforms and new properties, right, that are based not only in consumer need, but perhaps more cause marketing led, you know, the things that you want to give back to communities. You start to speak in newer terms that may be different than the ones you've spoken for in 2019. As we sit here at the beginning of Q2 2021, what stays? What goes? Where do you move forward? How do you see in real life returning to form? You know, how do you sort of see that dance moving through the next, let's say, 90 days, 120 days, 180 days, you know, into the fall?
Yeah, I mean, I think the speed of the vaccine deployment has really, I think, amped all of us, right, and our partners to get back to live. I think, you know, for some of us, it may be happening way sooner than we had anticipated. You know, as you're planning for 2021, you're kind of thinking, all right, that's going to be a little further off in the year, but you know, in all likelihood, it's here and it's coming. So for us, we are still we're very hopeful, and we're still going to be cautious, right? And really lean in on the protocols and our partners who are going to be standing up the live events, music festivals coming back, capacities at near, you know, full capacity. So it is exciting. And so I think that we will come back to and figure out how we're going to activate live, but we can't lose sight of all that we learned during, you know, this past year, which we've all talked about here. It's the scale of digital and virtual. So for us, it's marrying those two. How do we do things in, you know, kind of like a hybrid environment? How do we still provide really truly engaging activations at the live level while we're able to reach, you know, in greater scale? So I think a lot of the bigger events will come back. I am hopeful that the local and hyper local events that are really driving community, you know, they make it back, and that we can see that in this year. I'm not sure, because I think it'll vary state by state, but hopeful for that, because you know, at that grassroots level, we certainly need to support as well.
No, that's great. I agree. And you know, to your point, and we've seen that shift really this year, that the more locally meaningful efforts can be, marketing or otherwise, the more resonant they will be with ultimately the people that view them. So things can't be too high in the sky. And just to build on that, Ronnie, as you think about the success that you've seen at AB InBev with maybe more digital programs that you've led, are you also looking at it as a staged comeback where, you know, in real life experience will be at the same pace as vaccine, or do you think that it will sit a little bit more digitally leaning through? Just kind of curious where you see.
So a couple of things. One, this may be controversial, but I truly don't think that, I think the pandemic showed what we all already knew, right? Like, I feel like we already knew that we could reach scale through digital. We already knew that we were creating incredible content when we did our events that could be leveraged. I just don't think we ever had necessarily the budget or like the right to do it, because we didn't have as many believers. Like, we've already been live streaming events. You know, we did Post Malone Dive Bar Tour where we would have 250 people in a bar, and we knew that's not a good ROI. But then if we live streamed it, that we would get a ton of people to watch. So we were already doing these things. People were already working out at home. So it wasn't new to bring workouts at home with a happy hour with Movement Live, our wellness platform. It was just the open kind of red carpet to go and do it because there was no other choice. So now for me, and I will answer your question, but what I say to my team and what my team is focused on is just figuring out what tools to use from their tool closet, right? When we're looking at the world ahead of us. So not every event needs to be live streamed. Some merit that. Some events are content factories and should be leveraged for that. Some should be strictly focused on the in-person experience. Some maybe just make sense for digital. I'll give a great experience. I'll bring up Movement again. Movement is our wellness platform. It was an in-person tour. We had these incredible scaled experiences from big events to local events to studio takeovers. And we always knew we needed a digital version of it, but we never had the ability to do it. Just budgets were too thin. We were too focused on other things. The pandemic forced us to do virtual workouts, and now that's here to stay. So the team is creating an always-on digital hub that will host workouts and cool content with a lot of our wellness influencers and create ticketed events and do all these incredible things while also planning our in-person local tours and national tours. So I think for me, I don't have a crystal ball. I think we are planning day by day and for the moment. I am looking forward and excited by the fact that the things that we sponsor, our festivals, our partners and venues are saying we're coming back and they're providing dates or information. So cool, we're ready. We're going to be ready. We're planning for it, but we're also being super cognizant of the reality of the moment. So on premise is slowly opening up, bars and restaurants. So that's a huge focus for us right now. We are not yet at the level of doing big owned in-person events. We are touching some kind of small audiences and the things that we're doing. You'll see in one of our live streams coming up on May 2nd, if I may do a plug, that we will have some small audiences, and man, it makes a difference when the artists can go cheers and there's people there that are like, cheers. You're like, oh, I can't wait for this moment. But we're cognizant of the reality. So I look at places like Texas, I look at places like Miami, and I'm like, wow, they have like thousands of people in a club with a DJ. Like, we're not there yet. I'm glad that someone is, but we're not. So we're just being really mindful of the realities and the responsibility to do the right thing in the moment. And it's up to us to make those decisions. We are focused on local, of course, because that's kind of like lighting up on the map, things are opening up. And I really hope that by the end of the summer, we're sponsoring a ton of incredible events and we're able to start, you start going, and I look forward to it. I know we're all ready.
You all sponsor some tremendous events. So I know that once you're back in the game, that means life is officially returned to normal, and we'll all be drinking beers and having some good time. So excited for that myself.
So Jamey, I coming off of this, something that you said earlier, and in the past conversations that you've had with the ANA about digital being an enabler, right? I think I got that right. And as I'm hearing you talk, Ronnie, and for all of you that are out in the peanut gallery, I think that one of the biggest questions is, will it ever go back to the way it was? And where does digital fall in this? And I think, Ronnie, the way that you explained it makes it feel like this is our new reality going forward. So Jamey, talk a little bit about that from your perspective. And then also, what advice would you give your business partners that do more traditional live events and where they need to be to answer where we're at in the industry right now?
Yeah, great question. I'd say, is it going to go back to the way it was? I think it's a yes and a no. I think like what Ronnie and Christina were saying is the events that we're all so excited to come back live and for us to be a part of and to support, ranging from the big ones to the hyper local small ones. Like, yes, like I'm also like really optimistic. I think we're around the corner from that, and excited for that. So I think in that way, will it come back? Yes. I think in another way, it's what Ronnie said, which is we went from experiential to experience, right? And we used to, even internally, we would define experiential as engaging a consumer in a live setting.
Right.
And I think that that's actually too limiting for what experiential is. And I think the past year defined that, right? It's like, even if we go back a year ago, Travis Scott on Fortnite, like that was also an eye-opening moment of millions of people, right?
Right.
Viewing, being a part of the experience, but there was no physical engagement as part of that. It was entirely digital. But is it experiential? Like, I'd say yes. So I think the scope of our teams, what we do and the way that we engage consumers, I think that that has permanently changed. And in that way, I don't think we should go back. And I think it's actually a really exciting thing for our industry. It's like, as everyone said, there's like so much empathy and like compassion for what our industry and so many people have gone through over the last year. But looking forward, there's actually like, it's really bright in the sense of the work that we do has fundamentally changed. And to answer your question around, you know, different partners or agencies or production groups that have been used to or thrive on live events, I think it's just really important to embrace the change. I think that live is going to still play a really critical role for what we all do. And it's been said, but like, we're all so excited to get back to physical engagement, like can't wait for those live experiences. But how you leverage digital as part of that to amplify it, but also create new experiences that may live digitally, but off of a physical event, or how we engage in the content we create. I think all of that has evolved so quickly that it's important for everyone to embrace it and leverage the capabilities that we built over the past year to carry all of that forward.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree. I just wanted to hear you all say it because I think it's really an important point. I think it's heavily on a lot of people's minds. And I agree with both of you in that 2020 to me really pushed innovation at an accelerated pace that I don't think would have ever happened without it. And I think even if we look at what's going on with in-store experience and retailers jumping on digital, I think it would have been another 10 years, honestly, before there would have been the level of adoption that we've seen there. So thank you so much. And Cliff, would you like to jump in and reach out with another question?
Yes. I think this is all tremendous, right? And it's all super, super critical because, you know, if we've learned anything, we've seen consumer shifts and we've been able to react to situations, right? And everyone's been very pragmatic about getting themselves and their business into a place to readdress a new consumer need. So, you know, this question is directed for Michael. So, you know, knowing the work that MasterCard does in the sponsorship space, knowing the role of customer loyalty, right? When we think about life post-COVID, you know, what is your point of view on interacting with consumers? You know, what are the new rules of engagement? What are the new roles of trust? You know, just where is MasterCard with regards to what their consumers would like to see from an experience standpoint? What is their expectations from sponsorships? Any insight you might be able to give me on what you're thinking there would be ideal.
Yeah, look, I think it's a great question. It's one where we're all asking ourselves. I mean, for us, certainly not the reason we wanted it to happen, but one of the things that's happened because of COVID is the notion of contactless and touchless payment, right? As we think about sort of the digital ecosystem and going into venues and not having to touch anything or anyone and still being able to pay, even if it's, you know, ordering food from your seat, if it's paying the proverbial hot dog vendor who now takes, you know, a contactless tap as opposed to cash. So all of those things I think we're well suited for. And I think it's something that almost now has to happen. Whereas before it was slowly happening, it's sort of now advanced a half a generation. But, you know, it'll be interesting to see what consumer response is. I was talking to someone the other day about flying to the Major League Baseball All-Star game this July, and we're the presenting sponsor of the game. And I was like, is everyone wearing a mask on a plane for the All-Star game in 2022? Or are people pretending that it's over and it happened and we're going to go back to 2019 behavior? I don't know. Right. And so what does that mean for music concerts, for priceless experiences? And I do agree with some of the other panelists. You are going to see this sort of hybrid world for a while, where some people are more comfortable, some people are less comfortable, some states are more open, some states are less open, and trying to sort of navigate to, I think a one size fits all is probably not the right approach at this point, because you do have different needs and different desires. I do think you'll see sort of the hygiene, cleanliness, space ramifications last for a little while at venues. Not all venues and in all places, but I think generally it will be more top of mind for consumers. But yeah, it's a question that we'll continue to monitor and frankly evolve our activations accordingly.
It's a tremendous observation. You're right. It's not going to be a one size fits all. There will not be a grand reopening, if you will. Things will be segmented and tiered, and it will move at a particular pace. And you're right. You can only react to the environment with which you find yourself. So tremendous insights there. And knowing that, right? So when we think about consumer experience and you realize that it will be somewhat fragmented, does that mean that you are building 2 or more experiences with any one particular environment? Jamey, when you think about running a full boat of experience, right? Then you think about consumer context and the types of messages people want to hear. Does this mean that you're looking at planned or staged executions, or are you looking at consumer need? How do you view that sort of return to form, if you will, across multiple experiences?
Yeah, I think what would be interesting is because again, we're active now with our field marketing team in different cities, and we're in Dallas and we're in Austin, we're in New York, we're in Miami. Like, it's just very different across these cities. So understanding consumer behavior, understanding local guidelines, and above all, right, putting safety. It's like we're very careful about how we activate, but understanding the local aspect of it as well. To your question around like consumer behavior, I don't see us necessarily creating 2 different experiences based on people's sentiment around the pandemic or the health risks. For us, like, we're just going to create the safest possible experience we can, right? And it's essentially ensuring that no matter what someone's opinion is or how they may be treating the pandemic, we are approaching it in a way that's to make everyone as comfortable as possible. I think what will change, or we're not change, it's just that we're consistently evolving in this, is that consumer behavior has changed so much through the pandemic. Like, people have a heightened expectation of personalization. They expect more convenience. The way people shop, if we think about food and beverage, like, people are shopping totally differently now. With the rise of e-com and delivery platforms and ghost kitchens, it's a totally different landscape now than it was a year ago. So how that is reflected in our experiences is something that we're very much thinking about. So, if we were to host a large event within that, or a large experience within that, how it's more personalized to the consumer based on their behavior and what they want, how they want to experience our brands. That's very much what we're thinking about, is how to reflect the evolution of like a consumer behavior and how that is delivered through an experience that we create.
That's great. It's tremendous. And I think that, personalization, localization, right? These are recurring themes that put the consumer first. And ultimately, that's where I believe brands win. And it feels like individually and collectively, we're seeing a tremendous amount of success with going at it that way. So fascinating to see. I guess, when we think about one tangential follow-up, and then Dee, you take over from here. But I am just curious, and I will ask Ronnie, right? So when you think about this post-COVID return, there are tremendous hard assets to manage when you think about in real life experience versus digital experience. So knowing that you have to be very targeted, at least in this calendar year, do you set your sights on certain things, or is it really just sort of a wait and see approach right now when it comes to that shift back into IRL?
I've developed a little bit of a philosophy on this, which is that during COVID and during virtual, I was very much into owned. Unfortunately for some of our partners who could close their ears. But what I found very quickly is that it just made much more sense for us to own the experience, right? Not to sponsor it. So for a live stream, the investment for me to sponsor and the investment for me to do it myself are not that far off, but the payoff is so much greater when it's my own event. And the reason for that is we are not interested in creating commercials or advertisements. We're interested in creating branded content. And so we put a lot of dollars into fewer, bigger, better in experiential. So you'll see like our live streams, we do fewer, bigger, better across the board, whether it be with Stella and cooking, with workouts, with music and Bud Light Seltzer. And we did it on our own, right? We didn't sponsor it. I think when we get back to in real life events, I think we will rest a lot on our partners here, right? They will be the ones to put on and operate these massive events and be the ones who really have to think through, because their bread and butter is opening up the doors and operating these locations, from festivals to music venues to sports stadiums, which we're already active in, right? As Major League Baseball has opened up. So for me, that is going to be another shift, right? When we start focusing a lot more on rented properties as we head into the late summer. And I will be more cognizant of doing more smaller in-person owned events, just to start testing things out and figuring things out. Also, in general, our in-person owned events are not usually massive from an attendance, right? We don't put on 50,000 person events. We sponsor for that scale. So it's our partners that we're really leaning on to lead the charge, and to figure out the investment in terms of innovation and figuring out how they're going to manage vaccinated, not vaccinated, cleanliness, cashless payment, all of those things that are super important. And then our job is to show up and put on best experiences for the people that are there. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, that makes a tremendous amount of sense. Tremendous amount of sense.
Cliff, I saw Christina was nodding her head when Jamey was talking, the beauty of doing a virtual panel. So Christina, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this conversation?
No, I mean, it's so great to hear partners out there living the same, the same world that we're living in. Like, I feel like I have a parallel universe with Ronnie in so many ways, and I think we have many of the same partners. So I'm with you on all of that, all the always on stuff, while you have to care for so much more. And we learned for our customer events what was being done well in the virtual space. We did the golf lessons. We did, I think, in MasterCard probably the same. All of us are doing the same things, and what landed well, we'll continue to do. Gaming is huge. We're a huge sponsor of many and partner of many different esports and gaming entities. And that community was already doing experiences really well virtually. So we've learned from them, we've tapped into that, and that will be always on. But when Jamey was talking about the customer behavior, and Michael was touching on it too, when you start to think about everything contactless and everything app-based, we're already so trained in just a year to check in when you get somewhere, to have your food ready for pickup, to just purchase everything. Everything's contactless. That obviously for us at Verizon, that's amazing. And how do we lean into that? How do we enable experiences for our customers that are leaning into it? Because that customer behavior is not going to go away. Like, you're just going to see that adapted in more and more places. So I was nodding with everybody.
Well, I tell you, it'll be really interesting and I'm sure you're all reading the same things that we are. And will there be a vaccination passport to get in? Will you have to prove that you've had a vaccination? All those things that come into all the idiosyncrasies, and it probably depends on a state-by-state basis, right? On where this is going to happen and where it's not going to happen. But I love the point that we're already used to having some sort of gating when people are coming into our experiences to begin with. So, Michael, do you have anything you'd like to add to this?
I think it's one of those things that only time will tell, right? And it is interesting from everything from how do people go back to the office in what way, and how does that impact our internal teams and how we handle internal discussions, and is it Zoom or together in a conference room or a hybrid, and what does that mean to, for planning events with our agencies and how that happens, and then obviously executing it at venues and everything else, or even, more sort of simply sounding, right, hosting customers. Some are vaccinated, some aren't vaccinated. Can we ask? Do we ask? What's the liability? Legal gets in, right? I mean, there's all these just things that if I had said to you, 15 months ago, you'd have been like, what are you talking about? That now are questions that arise. And I imagine that'll happen for a little while longer, which is okay. And I think it goes back to what we said before, which is, right, be nimble and be creative and kind of assume you'll figure it out.
Right. Well, and I think it's funny when we talk about what consumer habits are already and how the new norm is a norm we never thought would have been the new norm. I would have never thought when I have my kids leaving the door, as opposed to saying, did you get your lunch? It's like, don't forget your mask, right? So it's funny how pliant we are as humans and able to kind of roll with the punches. So I think it'll be interesting to see it all unfold. So I have a question for you. And, as we've talked about, digital being a core part of experience now versus maybe in the past, it was more of an amplifier, right? So, as you're looking at planning brand plans, for the year, how has that changed? And I will say there are many marketers that I'm aware of that literally canceled or totally reallocated some of their experiential marketing funds for 2020 and part of 2021. How do you see it coming back? How do you see it change? You can see that we've got this blurred area now between physical and digital that's going to continue. And I think we all agree that that's going to continue. How does that change things internally from a brand standpoint and budgeting as you're looking at making marketing plans and decisions? So who wants to attack this one? You want to give it a shot, Ronnie?
Well, without getting into specifics on how we do our budgeting, which I won't talk about, listen, I think that we are going to have the money that we need to do events. It's like, if everything we're saying is true, which is that we need to meet the consumers where they are, I think that it would be a huge mistake to not, for marketing budgets to not be allocated to support the reality of what's going to happen when we hopefully get on the other side of this pandemic. So I am exceptionally hopeful and confident that our budgets will be fine. Did we have an impact to our budgets this year? Absolutely. Did we have to be more scrappy? 100%, but it was across the board. Everybody did. So I don't want to just say, oh, we suffered the most. Everybody suffered, right? Because every decision you made, had to be taken more seriously, and just how we looked at our budget in general. So I'm super confident. Again, how we allocate budget between our digital team and our XM team and the brand comms lead, there's finesse in there. But I think ultimately when we do plan our plans, we work collectively. And so if there are these tentpole moments or big moments, our media and digital team knows, and we all collectively budget for it together. So I think we're going to be okay. I feel good about it.
Well, I had to ask the question because I really think one of the goals for today is to create hope and optimism for an industry that's been so horrifically impacted. due to COVID. So thank you for that. I saw, Michael, you were kind of nodding your head, Jamey as well. Does anyone else want to jump in and provide any commentary on this question?
I mean, I would just echo what Ronnie said, right? I mean, certainly budgets are being scrutinized as they always are, and we need to make it work. And there's also an understanding that we want to take advantage of the tentpole events and the partners and the partnerships that we have, and that's why we have them. And you know, I think it's also a lot of scenario planning, because there's always unknown. There's just more unknown now. You know, as you think about when you start the budget process for the year, and you know, maybe there's 3 scenarios you typically kind of play out. Well, now there's 8, right? You know, vaccinations, when does it happen? When do things reopen? Does a variant come into play? Does it not? Are people willing to travel more? Are they not? So you just have to sort of think about all that. And then to Ronnie's point, you know, most of us work for really big companies. And we're certainly important extensions of those companies, but there's a lot of other things that factor into our company's bottom line beyond just what we're doing, and that obviously impacts us. And so I think it's all of these things that come into play, and yet I'm confident that, you know, we've gotten a virtual Grammys in the books and a Arnold Palmer Invitational in the books, and we'll get a Major League Baseball All-Star game in July, and et cetera, et cetera. So it'll happen, and we'll make it work.
I love it. I love it. You know, one of the things that you just said also made me think of, you know, things that have changed within our business, and, you know, activation timelines have changed, right? Where it used to be, well, we need 12 weeks to get this going. Now it's like, all right, we need to make this happen in 2 weeks, because everything's moving at such a pace that our activation timelines against many of these things have been truly condensed as well, right? So great. Jamey, did you have something you wanted to share?
Sure. Yeah. It's very similar to what Ronnie said too. I think, you know, for us, like we had a activation last year we were planning for one of our brands called Life Cuisine, and it was going to be a physical activation focused on driving trial. We quickly knew that wasn't going to work. And rather than the dollars going somewhere else, you know, the brand team thankfully stayed committed. And the concept we landed on was essentially a last mile delivery initiative with Grubhub, where we were providing free meals through Grubhub. So it's a different way to experience the product, but it was the way people were experiencing food and still are. And for that, it tightened the collaboration with our digital team and other, you know, internal partners. And I think that's just where we have to continue going forward. Obviously, we're lucky too that we just have a good relationship with our digital and our media teams. But as a result of that, we've also gotten so much tighter with our digital analytics team. And as we think about measurement across experiential, right, that's been a topic forever. And we do have ways that we can measure physical engagement, and we tie it back to the business, but like the digital piece of it is very tangible. And it was a positive outcome of the work that we did last year, but how that's going to impact us going forward. Because as we've all said, right, like the consumer is not going to go back the way it was. So neither should we. And as we move forward, it's like this collaboration we've had internally, just maintaining that going forward.
Super. And I have to say, Christina, I saw a big smile on your face when Jamey was bringing up digital analytics. So I'm thinking you must have something to share about that.
No, I think he nailed it. And I wish our digital analytics partners were on this to hear the kudos out to them. But I don't think they were ready for what was coming their way in everything that we needed to partner with them on. And they continue to help us drive some of what we're doing now, right? We learned a lot over the year. But now we can really take that learning and we could start to do things that are more informed, that help us drive, the goals in a much more, impactful way. So that's why I was a big smile, kind of laughing, because again, they're like, we're not staffed for this. So.
Well, and they probably aren't, but let's hope that everyone gets staff for this, because I think the one thing that we're hearing, this is not changing. This is going to be the way that it is. And I think I think that, looking at digital and physical experience as two separate things that occasionally get stuck together has changed like forever. And I think it needs to be merged as one thought, one experience, and working more collaboratively together. So I don't see that changing. Cliff, did you have a comment?
No, I think this is all just fascinating stuff. I'm super interested in everything that I'm hearing. If anything, it leads me, just into maybe what could turn into one last question. But so much of everything that we've heard today, I mean, you guys have all brought up some tremendous examples of meeting consumer needs, right? Whether in 2020, whether that is free meals through Grubhub. Ronnie, we are both partners with the National Independent Venue Association. You get into these campaigns and these modes, right, where in 2019, brands created messages that were delivered to consumers and hoped that they purchase something, right? In 2020, we learned that it's people over products every step of the way. Now that we know that, collectively and individually, you guys have built some tremendous platforms and relationships and opportunities, and you all wield tremendous power within, your respective verticals. Ronnie, I'll start with you. Sort of how do you see the role of, I don't want to say cause marketing, but the idea of purpose within experience to drive further relevance against the consumer? You don't want anything to just be 1 year. So tell me a bit about how you're approaching, driving value for consumers in other ways.
Yeah. And again, I think this was existing before COVID, right? I mean, all the research was showing that consumers choose the companies they love a lot, but based on what they stand for, right? And what they support. And so I don't think that this is anything new. And there's a constant conversation internally about who we are, what we stand for, and what we do. I think when we came out the gate at the start of the pandemic, we were doing a ton, right? We were focused on how to keep studios and gyms open. We were focused on the Bartenders Association, on-premise accounts with our open for takeout to make sure people were ordering food from their local restaurants. We were focused on music. We did a program with YouTube that was called Save Our Stages, which was a $1 million donation to NEVA, which was an incredible partnership and really something that I was very passionate about. I think, and then, as I said, we had, the Red Cross initiative. I think now as an organization, we've decided to put more focus on a few things that we can really level up our investment and be super focused. So you'll see the company has come together collectively around this kind of vaccine awareness. And we have some more stuff coming, which is really exciting. So I think that's really critical. And I think I've also teetered, right? Like there's something about us investing dollars and supporting initiatives. But I think the kind of runway to ask people in a time where we had, close to 30 million people unemployed in this country, to ask people to make donations was something that felt tough to do. So I think it's something we continue to explore, right? What is the cause-based element and what we're doing? And I think we don't have all the answers, but I know for us, it's really important to rally around a couple causes collectively as a company.
Well, that's great. That's great. And to your point, to continue that conversation that's already been there, knowing that this is important to consumers and now really making it a part of your everyday business. Jamey, knowing that you look across so many different verticals within Nestlé, within the experiential, is this something similar for you as well, to continue the good work that you've done and bring it further in? Or is that something that's handled separately? Tell me a bit about, your approach on that.
Yeah, no, similarly, I look at the other brands that are here and they've done such a good job related to purpose. A lot of what we do too, some of it comes through at a brand level, but a lot of it comes through at a corporate level as Nestlé USA. But it's very important. It's a topic we're really focused on. Obviously, when you think about purpose, it needs to be really authentic. It needs to be sustained and just that shouldn't change, right? You're truly committed to it for the long term. So it's a topic we're working with our brand teams on, in some cases actively activating against. One of the first things we did when the pandemic hit was we had our teams out in these markets for our field marketing team, and it was just providing product to hospitals and other locations, just supporting those on the front lines, essentially. So it was under the radar, but as a team, it was like, we just felt it was the right thing to do. It was like, what can you do in that moment? So bigger picture, think about above the line work and experiential, it's something that we plan out brand by brand, and develop the right strategies against. But yeah, similar to Ronnie, it's something that we're highly focused on.
And that's so great to hear. Thank you.
I'm
So
going to
Cliff,
jump in if you don't.
I was just gonna, sorry, Gina, I was probably gonna do what you're asking to have done. I know that we've had many questions that have come up during our discussion, and Gina has been going through some of those questions. And Gina, I wanted to toss it over to you, and feel free to pick up the conversation.
Sounds great. Michael, I think this one sounds good for you. It comes from Kelly, and she asks, what has been the most challenging issue regarding activations and sponsorships you've had to respond to outside of COVID this year?
I think it's all the planning and doing things differently. Whether it's shooting talent over Zoom, because there's nobody on site other than the skeleton production crew, and that's sort of an interesting setup. To how do you create a B2B hosting program that's all virtual, because you have golfers in an event, but not any of the customers. So I think it's just sort of reimagining things that a year ago, if I had mentioned we were doing this, everyone would have looked at me like I was crazy. And now it's part of the world we live in. And so I think it's sort of just understanding that, you can still be impactful from an experiential standpoint, even in the environment which we currently are operating in, and then sort of figuring out how to best do that. I don't think there's one particular thing. I think it's all of these things together that have been both challenging and rewarding.
Fabulous. I think what we'll do is we'll do a lightning round, and I'll throw out the questions, and you guys raise your hand if you want to answer it, and we'll get through the rest that we have that have been asked by the members. So here we go. Do any of the panelists have plans to activate at any events in the next few months? If so, what are you most excited about, or what have you done to prepare differently for this event?
I'll take it. I mean, I think it depends on what activation means. I mean, we are out there with our brand activation, managers every day in the on-premise where we can be. We are out there doing like local events through our wholesalers and through regional teams. And we were out there for opening day of baseball, and we'll continue to be in different ways. We actually did an activation in person in Chicago and New York to celebrate opening day. I think in terms of like large scale events, we're looking forward to some of the music festivals that have announced. Some of them are starting in July, which seems very exciting and hopeful. So obviously really looking forward to getting back in the dust with human beings. I was on a production last night and we had a small audience there, and man, like it was just such an incredible feeling. Everybody there, you could just see the energy of people just coming out of their caves and just being like so ready to be with other humans celebrating together. So I think we're all looking forward to like real human contact and like just being around other people. So that is what I am most looking forward to.
Agreed. Okay, next one. With all the demographic shifts in the US, especially amongst younger consumers, how are your brands adapting their experiential efforts to connect with a more diverse audience? Anyone? Don't make me pick on you. Christina.
I'll try and take this one. So, we obviously, our demographics, our reach goes across everybody. But, we've made some conscious efforts to focus in on that younger demographic and around gaming. So it is astonishing the engagement levels that happen when there is a virtual game event. The passion for these esports athletes rivals the passion for professional sports athletes. It's quite amazing. So we've seen that and we're harnessing it, and so that's one of the areas that we're focusing on, as well as when we look at music, and we have the partnership with Live Nation as well, and reaching that demographic is definitely by whatever artists that we're leaning into for the appropriate events or activations.
Great, thank you. Okay, so with so much conversation around digital content creation, do you think the role of the brand ambassador will need to expand?
I can take that.
Thanks.
Jamey, do you want to go ahead?
Go for it, Michael.
I was just going to say, to me, one of the interesting things around brand ambassadors in the world now is time, right? So before, you would get them for a shoot day or maybe blocks of miscellaneous time that you need them for. Well, now I can have a brand ambassador join via Zoom for 10 minutes. But on the other hand, they're not likely thrilled with doing 10-minute blocks of various Zoom bombing. So I think the relationship and the negotiation about what you're looking for and what they can offer you has changed a little bit, right? Because they're more nimble and it's easier for them. They can be sitting at home on their couch. On the other hand, it's changed the dynamic of how you block time or quote unquote buy time with them. So that's the biggest change I think I've seen with them. I think brand ambassadors will continue to be wildly relevant, at least for MasterCard. But I think how we use them and how we sort of plan ahead from a contractual standpoint, definitely some thought-provoking options based on the shifting world we live in.
Thank you, Michael. Jamey, I'm going to throw this one to you simply because you were going to answer the last one. What impact will the change in where people eat, work, and play, think Zoom Burbs and Millennials moving out of New York City and LA, for example, have on experiential?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. We're actually actively talking about this now because, again, like with a hyper-local program, you look at a city like Austin, for instance, there's not as many people downtown right now. They're in the suburbs. So as we think about like where we're activating and how we're activating, and when I say activating, in some cases it's physical, but again, it's also digital. So we're very much considering that to say, I would say for large events, I think we can, as they come back, we can be confident that as people get more comfortable, they'll come back, right? And we'll know where we can reach larger groups of people. But in the day-to-day activity that we do, some of the maybe more hyper-local activity, that does change, right? As people are maybe not working from the office as much, it'll be interesting over time to downtown locations. And if you were going to reach someone on their way to work or doing their lunch break, is the traffic the same as it was before? As we think about intercepting people, it might not be the case. So we do think about the cities a bit differently and have adjusted in some cases the geographies that we're focused on. And that'll just be one that we continue to keep an eye on over time.
Sounds great. Listen, there are probably a dozen more questions, which we're clearly not going to get to. It's obvious we could stay here all day. Do you guys have the rest of your day free? Can we just continue on? I'm guessing no. I want to just say a couple of housekeeping things, and then I think we'll close it out. I wanted to just thank you all for coming today. This is a great experience for an industry and a bunch of professionals who really needed to hear from you. So thanks for joining today. For those in attendance, you'll receive a short survey from us afterward. We'd really appreciate hearing from you. It's the only way we get better and we make sure that we're delivering the content that you're looking for and the guidance and the inspiration. Lastly, for those of you who are interested in experiential, we do have a conference next week. It's the ANA Experiential Content and Commerce Conference. It's running from April the 20th to the 21st. And believe it or not, it is not free, but the prices are very, very, very reasonable. So please join us for that, as well as to continue the conversations around these emerging areas, but really experiential marketing. And then, Dee, did you want to say anything in closing, Cliff?
Yeah, just a few things, and I will keep it short and sweet. Two things that really stuck with me is experience marketing versus experiential marketing. I love that. I think it's brilliant. And also digital as an enabler versus solely an amplifier. Love that. I think those are two things that we need to take forward in all the work that we're doing. And also just a few things that I got from you as panelists. And I just wanted to end with those. So one is being full of courage. And I felt that a lot today. Leadership. I think we've seen tons of leadership on this call today. Visionaries, but also being thoughtful and empathetic. And I love that. And the need to be nimble. And I want to end it by saying, I think the one thing I took from today is that we're all hopeful. And that's the emotion that I'd like you to leave today with, and to feel really proud about who we are and what we do within this discipline. Thank you.
Jamey, Christina, Michael, Ronnie, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your time. Cliff and Dee, thanks for keeping us on task and asking all the important questions.